have 3 board members yet to arrive. Jim Johnson indicated to me that he would likely be arriving late. Robin has indicated that she's stuck in traffic in a detour. Have not heard from David Paulson. So, excuse me? Oh, and Nikki is not here. Okay. So we have Brian, 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, we have a quorum here, so we are able to do business. So calling this meeting to order, is there a motion for approval of the agenda? Brian?
I would make a motion to adopt the agenda with the HR addendum sitting at our stations.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Newman. All in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. We have our agenda approved. We will now take some time to have comments from the audience. Want to remind folks to please treat everyone here with respect, that we've all taken time out of our schedules to prepare for the meeting and to be here. And so recognizing that there are oftentimes differences in opinions, that's great and fine, and differences in opinions are welcomed. What is desired is for us to all respect the time that we've chosen to prepare and to be here. And that also after, per our policy, after we have finished the public participation at this board meeting, then the board goes on to its business. So we will listen to what you have to say, and then we will conduct our business after that. And then I will end up calling you up to the microphone based on the order that you signed up. At this time, the board will hear comments from the public. We ask that each speaker who is signed up to address the board state name and address for the record. Speakers must refrain from using this forum to criticize or complain about a specific employee or student by name. Vulgar or profane language will not be tolerated. The board is interested in your comments and will listen carefully, but is not obligated to respond or to debate issues in this forum. Should you desire a written response to a specific question, you may request it. This evening, each speaker will be allotted a maximum of 4 minutes. Upon conclusion of the allotted time, a chime will sound and the speaker is asked to conclude. If necessary, a final chime will sound 15 seconds later, signifying the end of the person's time at the podium. And our first speaker this evening is Kathy Johnson.
Good evening, school board members. My name is Kathy Johnson, and I'm a Fargo resident at 2022 Park Boulevard South. School board members, I am not here tonight to debate whether masks work or not, which I don't believe they do for SARS or influenza, or to debate whether or not extended mask use is harmful for our bodies, which I 100% believe that they are harmful for us. Instead, I am here to tell you about my rights and freedom as not only a parent, but as an American citizen. Now, if you wish to mask your child, that is your choice and your right, but I reserve the same right for my child to not be masked. A mandate is not a law. The school board cannot make laws. The CDC cannot make laws. The North Dakota Department of Health cannot make laws. They can make recommendations, and you can choose to follow those recommendations or not, and that is called informed consent, which each and every one of us has a right to informed consent. Parents, we are strength in numbers. Together, we can get this changed. They cannot kick all of our kids out of school. They need our children in school for their funding. Together, we are strong. Board members, if you truly cared about our children's health, you would not be coming up with solutions that suppress our children's immune systems. You would not be calling for masks or having hand sanitizer every 15 feet in the schools or social distancing. You would be doing things to strengthen their immune systems. You should be encouraging parents to make sure their kids are getting enough vitamin D, enough vitamin C, enough zinc, enough sleep, enough water. You should be looking at lengthening phy-ed times and recess times where our kids can actually get out and get fresh air and interact with each other, get exercise. You should be looking at our school lunches and saying, is this really what we want our kids eating every day? My husband and I choose to educate our daughter that it is our responsibility to take care of our immune system and our health. And I'm telling you now, we refuse to teach our daughter to live in fear. We need to get away from these fear-based decisions and get back to science and common sense. A mask is nothing more than an illusion of safety. It has been proven that it does not stop a SARS virus or influenza, so why are we forcing these on our children? Does the benefit really outweigh the risk? Can we really afford to suppress our children's immune system another year? Or delay their educational or social development another year? School board members, you cannot force our children to wear masks. This is not a decision for you to make. Tomorrow morning, if my child arrives at school and is not showing any signs of COVID-19 and is not a direct threat to the establishment, how can you turn her away? Is that not discrimination? This mask mandate needs to be changed, and we as American citizens have a right to informed consent, and I'm telling you now, you do not have my consent to mask my child. Thank you for your time.
All right, so we've discussed this in the past. We are allowing individuals to come here and speak. We ask that we make the most of the time of everyone that has been here or that is here. And applause isn't needed. So I understand if there are people on both sides of the aisle. No, that's okay. We'll take a break if needed. The next person is Cassie Schmidt.
Hi, my name is Cassie Schmidt. I'm with the group Let Parents Decide That. Number one, to assert that a taxpayer-funded group of parents here, we've got parents that make your jobs possible. So to assert that they have no rights when it comes to speaking out or making their voices heard, that's absolutely ridiculous. So if you want to clap, I would say go ahead and do so. You said that we cannot complain about employees or students by name. You guys have also said that you're not employees. So I don't see calling you out by name as so terrible. It's been really clear that you all make predetermined decisions when it comes to what's going on in this board. Last week, 2 weeks ago when we were here, less than an hour after we left and you guys had supposedly voted on masks, less than an hour after, each Fargo Public School parent had a very well-drafted email that somehow seemed like that had already been done. They had that in their inbox already ready. Just in case you had decided? What if there would have been changes made at the meeting? Probably changes were not going to happen because you guys already had it in your heads what you were going to vote on. We have information about the ESSER funding application that was sent through to the federal government by Kristen Baszler, and that included the universal and correct wearing of masks. So it's pretty clear that you guys already knew what was going to happen this year. Parents, the next couple comments are to you because obviously these people are not listening anymore. I want parents to know that you make the medical decisions for your children. Masks being used as medical devices come with medical consent. I will say it and say it and say it over and over and over again until some people understand that not every doctor can speak to every child's health, okay? I've got studies here that show lots of studies that show that masks don't work and they're in fact harmful. I've got copies for all of you because I think that some of you need to do your own research, and I think that if we're taking into account everyone's public health, then I want to get a call the next time one of you goes to the doctor and I want my opinion heard. If you guys think that your opinions are valid and should be weighed heavily when it comes to each child's personal health, well then I think it goes both ways. So the next time your kids have a medical issue, I want a phone call. I think you should call our group and you should see what we're thinking you should do with your children. Now, the entire premise that you guys have authority based on these decisions that you're making, you don't. You do not have the authority to make medical decisions on behalf of parents regarding minor children, period. Period. You have the authority that parents allow you to have, and we will not stand for this. There are plenty of parents that are willing to take their kids out of public schools. I think you all have already seen it happening. So keep that in mind for next week's meeting and the week after that and the week after that, because we're not done. We're not going to stop coming here and talking to you all, and we are not going to give in to this. Quite frankly, this is tyranny. You guys are trying to take parents' rights away, and we're not going to go for it. So here's some stuff that you could have.
Alexa Scott.
Okay. Hi, my name is Alexis Scott. I'm a Fargo resident. I'm at 2816 39.5 Avenue South in Fargo. Mask mandates and all issues aside, I'm hoping parents on all sides actually can come together for the sake of all Fargo Public School children and recognize that we need better leadership than what we have in front of us today. First, I want to point out that not a single parent or staff member was asked about the potential landscape for the 21-2022 school year. The Fargo Public School Board has hid behind laziness and lack of accountability when creating a strategic reentry plan for students. Whether it be school boundary changes, teacher safety concerns, and COVID mitigation strategies, this board continues to ignore all issues they don't want to hear. Parents on both sides of the aisle, this is pretty much unacceptable. Second, our teachers lack leadership and support. Earlier this summer, select board members yelled, intimidated, and ostracized our hardworking heroes to gain respect and authority. Our leaders have failed to recognize our teachers for who they are, instituted a grading system that lacks accountability for students and difficulty for teachers to navigate, all while lacking input from anyone on the receiving end of the matter. Staff morale is at an all-time low, and I think you all should be very aware of that. Because what does that mean? We're going to soon lose good educators here who can no longer cope with the stress that you have handed down to them. Our schools will continue to descend into the abyss if this leadership continues. Schools like Lewis and Clark, Bennett, Jefferson, all have open positions and not a single person necessarily applying for them. We have opened over 25 open para positions right now to support our students. No one wants to set foot in your doors. This board continues to vote in a way that supports a widened achievement gap for minority children who are ELL and supportive students in our classes. Did any of you sitting here today learn to speak English as a second language? Any of you? No? Okay, my family did. Ask yourselves if learning a second language is even remotely possible with a mask over your face and your teachers. Your practices are discriminatory for children with unique learning needs and circumstances who would be able to achieve more if given the choice to learn the way they are most comfortable and able. I work with these minority families. I am part of these Latino and Indigenous cultures. I've spent countless hours here in the Fargo-Moorhead area and in the Twin Cities, translating at public health offices, getting kids to school, food on their tables, resources. Distance and homeschool is not an option that you say is an option if we don't want to be part of this mask issue. These parents work odd hours. They deal with domestic violence. They're homeless or unstable. You should be ashamed of your careless acts who only see parents with stable homes and resources as the complainers. Not every child in this school is a white, stable, supported kid. You need to start recognizing that. You have over 1,000 students, in fact, who are actually receiving ELL services in school. Almost 60% or more, since you haven't updated the stats since 2018, are refugee and immigrant. This is yet another example on a lengthy list where your elitism and decision-making has shown and simultaneously failed to appropriately consider to serve families in unique circumstances where mask mandates can be a barrier to their achievement. I want to reiterate that I don't have issues with masks. I have issues with leaders who put kids in a one-size-fits-all assumption of their ability to learn and unwillingness to make accommodations otherwise. This board should actually not be surprised at all that there is a recall effort. You have failed to listen, you have failed to act, and failed to ask. For the sake of every parent who sends their child to Fargo Public Schools, we need to elect transparent leaders who support our kids and our teachers and not use discriminatory practices in their decision-making. Thank you.
Allie Ollenberger. You likely could not hear. I suggested that Allie Ollenberger come to the podium, please. Allie, you signed up next.
Hello. Allie Ollenberger, 3518 Grandwood Drive. We're the parents. We are the community, and we are the people that elected you to serve and make decisions on the educational needs and those needs alone. Your job is to listen to our voices and listen to the voices of the educators in this school system. Sorry. But on more than one occasion, you guys have failed to do so, like Alexis just highlighted. And tonight, we're here to hold you guys accountable. COVID was a new thing, something that we had to navigate. But instead of engaging the people who ultimately have to deal with the decisions that you make, you made them in a bubble, saying that you knew best and that we couldn't be trusted to make these decisions for ourselves or for our children. When people came to address this board and brought up other perspectives, you chose to say, we don't care. We only care about these 6 mitigation strategies. We care about them more than education and more than the overall well-being of children. No child is above these mitigation strategies, is what you told us all of last year and now going into this school year. School boundaries. No matter how many parents stood up here and pleaded and begged you to think about the impact of these decisions, you didn't care. You still made the decision, and you didn't care what the parents had to say, and you did what you did anyways. Our teachers. Have you looked at the overall teacher morale in the school system? I sat through many, many negotiation sessions this summer, and one key theme came out over and over and over again: support. Our teachers don't feel supported, whether that is financially, whether that's supported to defend themselves, and even their overall safety. Our teachers don't even feel supported to teach in some cases. The overall learning outcomes in FPS right now is less than 50%. That's not okay. That means less than half of our children are succeeding at the outcomes that they need. That's not okay. There's a saying out there, you don't quit your job, you quit your boss. I have seen many talented teachers leave due to the overall lack of support. And Fargo Public Schools has many, many job openings for paras and teachers with no applicants in sight. Anyone wonder why? I certainly don't as an outsider looking in. I could continue on and on with the many, many issues that have been going on in this school district, not just this year, but years. But in the end, it all comes down to one thing, and that is listening to the people that elected you. Myself and these other parents, sitting in this room, standing here behind me, standing here at the podium with me, are here to remind you that you work for us. We realized that we could stand up here and speak for hours and send tons of emails that go unanswered by more than half of you. And we realized that it wasn't going to matter. So we took a different route. And in June, we launched a recall of 4 board members. We as parents don't stand here alone tonight. We stand united and stronger together, backed by over 4,200 signatures of people in this community who also feel that you guys as a board has gone too far. Too many times, and you're not listening, you're not engaging, and you're not making the right decision for our kids. Are you willing to listen now? Your job on the school board is no longer secure. We have enough signatures for the recall for all 4 board members. And we are going to continue. And we are going to continue to collect signatures all the way up until that due date, just to prove to you how many people are fed up and done with you guys not listening.
Krista Williams.
Krista Williams, 1006 28th Street, Fargo. I'm here today to address the big topic. I'm new to the group, so my apologies. I wanted to let you know that I have done some homework. I reached out to my community and asked their opinion. I want them to know, Fargo, we're here for you. I heard the cries of the children, the fear of the many, the angry of the stress over each and every parent. Fargo, I hear you. We as the people say enough is enough. You as the Fargo School Board have the honor to serve this wonderful city and its people. We put our trust in you to stand for our best interests, not your best interests. Do you think you have truly done that? Not long ago, we as parents were surveyed on what days we wanted for holidays, whether we should have storm days or nothing. but nothing about COVID or concerns. Until recently, we were on board with the choice. I feel we, as a community, would do what's best. Instead, you pulled the rug from under us, issuing mandates, telling my children to suffocate for 7 hours each day. This should be my choice. Yours is inhumane. Could you do this to yourself? What you're asking of the children? If you say yes, I feel that's a lie. These children are only given a mass break to eat lunch each day. I ask you why you think gym class is a place for mass mandate. A child's favorite class used to be gym. Now my kids cry and fear it. Sorry. Let's talk about mental abuse, shall we? Oh my gosh. To criminalize the children for wanting air, to be threatened, bullied, and scolded, to be labeled unruly, non-compliant for simply wanting to breathe. Using abuse of power, threats of principal office visits, and parents' calls, not to mention having to leave. Shame on you. Shame on you. We have now lost trust in you. After all that, how do I send my child to your school and be comfortable with that? But I know, as each disaster, Fargo citizens will rise. They will come together. Today we take a stand. We will be heard. We will stand our ground and fight for our rights. We will never give up. Fargo, please stay strong. Thank you.
Kristen Charbonneau.
My name is Kristen Charbonneau, and I reside at 1708 Ninth Street, South Fargo. I could go on and on and on about why this mask mandate is wrong, but I think we've all heard lots about it. We can find science these days to support absolutely anything that we want. And so I think we need to go back to common sense. And when we're looking at the messages of what we are teaching kids, which is the whole point of them being in school, is education. We're teaching them that it's scary to be around people, that the air that we breathe is not, is bad for them. And I just think that this is ridiculous, and I just stand here in support of everybody that's come up here and spoke before me, and that this mask mandate needs to end.
All right, that concludes audience participation. Thanks for being here this evening. We're moving on to staff reports. The first item A is the enrollment update. Dr. Gross and Missy Eidsness.
It is not letting me locate the device then. Is it? Is it because that's still plugged in? I think you, no, I don't think it was plugged in. Oh, here we go.
Here we go.
Well, I apologize for the delay. We are trying to connect so we can share some data with you. There we go.
Perfect. Okay.
So each year about this time, we share with the board where we are at with enrollment for the upcoming school year. So what you'll see on this report are 3 different columns of data. The first column, or column B, is the current number of students enrolled as of this morning, about 9:30. You'll see the total number, K through 12, and then we have broken down the data for you in the different grade bands, elementary, middle school, and high school. To give you a comparison of data, we went back to last September 2nd. basically the beginning of last school year, so you can make a comparison between the number of students K through 12, middle school, elementary, and high school. And then lastly, what we provided for you in the last column is the projections that have been made by our demographer, RSP, just to see how close we are to those enrollment projections for this coming school year. From just a quick analysis of the data, you can see that as of this morning, we have almost 100 more students enrolled than we did on September 2nd. It is slightly under that demographer's estimate, but we are close to that. And then you can see the variances between elementary, middle school, and high school. So again, it was just an opportunity for us to give you an update of that. And then lastly, a unique piece that we have this year that we don't have each and every year. Included in these numbers are any of our students who have selected our COVID-19 distance learning opportunity. And we just wanted to again share that information with you. As of 9:30 this morning, we have 118 K through 12 students, and then you can see how they're broken down elementary, middle school, and high school.
Thank you, Dr. Gross. Does anyone have questions? Robin?
So the COVID numbers are included in the full number?
Yes, they are.
And then RSP give us an update with the expected kindergarten bubble?
Yeah, so for last year, we were down probably just shy of 200 kindergarten students from RSP's projection. And so this year, our expected kindergarten enrollment was 912, and we have 906 as of today. So we're seeing on track for kindergarten. We did not see a spike in our first grade numbers of like students coming back. But I will say that being shy of that RSP's projection, we are slightly lower than RSP in grades K1 and 2, if that makes sense.
Robin?
So is it safe to assume some families held their kindergartners back during the distance learning year?
It certainly could be, or they made a different choice, such as parochial or homeschooling.
David?
Now, this distance learning has there's no teacher involvement with Fargo Schools employees, is there?
So we are contracting with the North Dakota Center for Distance Education that has certified teachers by North Dakota standards. And then they meet with students, I think it is once a week, to go over, and they can meet additionally if needed. And then we did, though, feel it was important to have some oversight from our school district. So we do have elementary person overseeing the elementary enrollment and a secondary person for secondary to make sure that parents have access to additional support.
So that is by Zoom when they're meeting with these
I
students?
think they actually use a Microsoft product called Teams for their meetings, but it's the same thing, video conferencing.
And then even though this is through the Center for Distance Learning, do we get full funding for all of those kids?
I'm gonna, okay, Jackie's saying yes,
Minus whatever we have to pay
correct.
tuition?
Jackie?
Yep, yes, that would be correct. We keep them on our ADM and we will pay the tuition out.
Jennifer?
To clarify, Jackie, they don't have to pay in addition for the tuition. The district is covering those costs, is that correct? And then-
Correct. And there's no instances, are there any instances, Bob, where, because we've had students use the Center for Distance Ed prior to COVID even.
We have. So any family who has filled out the application or the paperwork to be part of our COVID-19 distance learning program does not pay for those credits or those courses. In the past, we have had some families who wanted to take one or multiple courses on their own. They did pay for those courses, and then we transcribed it back onto their record. But anyone in our distance learning piece this year, they've asked for it, it's being paid for from the district.
And if I may ask a follow-up?
Sure.
Thank you. So is every single class available this way, or are there restrictions at all levels?
So not every class that we offer is provided by the Center for Distance Education, but the core classes are English, math, science, and social studies. We are at the middle level, and I'll let Missy talk about elementary. At the middle level, we are allowing anyone part of that distance learning to choose one elective from the Center for Distance Ed. That, if a student goes through that course quicker than, let's say, the length of the semester, they are allowed then to enroll in another elective course. Those electives are not quite the same as that we have in Fargo, but that's not any different than the difference between Fargo and other districts across the state in the electives that they might have for middle level courses. At the high school, students are working with their guidance counselors to determine the correct coursework for them so that they can stay on track for graduation. There are AP level courses and there are dual credit level courses available through the Center for Distance Ed. But again, not every course that we offer is offered there, but that's not dissimilar to us compared to other districts across the state.
Robin, and then David.
So to clarify, North Dakota Center for Distance Ed has been around for quite a while, and we've utilized it, but the governor gave us, through the emergency orders, the opportunity to have our own virtual schools. So that's the difference between the past and what happened last year. I want to make sure I understand.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Dr. Gandhi, if you have something to add, and then David.
Well, just no longer the governor's order. It was House Bill 1388 and then House Bill 1236 that required the board to pass a policy on virtual instruction, which we brought to the board. Now, those policies will automatically sunset in January when North Dakota Department of Public Instruction outlines their virtual academy admin rules that are currently in process, but we'll just re-update the policy. So it's those two pieces of legislation that allowed the authority for us to get ADM for virtual instruction.
David, and then Jennifer.
Now, in the event that there are high school kids that wish to take an elective that is in our schools, can they participate in distance learning and then come to school to take those electives?
As of this time, we are asking that a family chooses the distance learning model based upon a COVID-related issue, and that they then need or want to not be in our school setting. So we have said it is either through our distance learning model or in-person instruction at this time.
That's an administrative decision that was made?
That was a decision that was made at the administrative level, yes.
So there are a number of electives that they have absolutely no way of taking if they're involved in distance learning.
There are some electives that are not offered through the Center for Distance Ed, but there are also additional electives that are offered through the Center for Distance Ed that we don't offer here in Fargo.
Jennifer.
Thank you. So the tuition sort of line item, I'm curious as to if you can speak to that dollar amount, because it really stems from a conversation that we had a year and a half ago, talking about the ability for students to be able to dial in to an existing classroom within Fargo Public Schools. And so I'm just curious, when we are tallying the tuition that we're using with ESSER dollars, what that amount is, and what it would cost to really make available to more students more opportunities, electives within the district.
Dr. Gandhi, you want to take that?
I can take the question part. Jackie will probably, I don't know if we have the numbers readily available, but we can get that for you. I think it's important to know where we are right now in the process of being able to provide virtual instruction. Like I said, the two pieces of legislation that gave the school boards the authority to do that are contingent upon North Dakota Department of Public Instruction developing their admin rules. Those admin rules will be open for public comment in September, and then they're supposed to be posted in January. So we're kind of in this gray area right now. So we are functioning under the authority given to us by DPI. What's been shared with DPI is that right now, at no point in time was the legislative intent or our school districts allowed to provide any sort of hybrid. So in-person students need to be in person and virtual students need to be virtual. So the option that some students can be in for some classes and not in for others is not an option that we're allowed, at least based on what DPI shared with us.
And this is good discussion. I know there have been some questions from constituents on this as well. I believe all board members just recently received, I think I received a couple of pieces of information from the Department of Public Instruction that helps answer some of these questions, so we can refer back to that. If there are additional questions, perhaps it would be okay to contact administration for some more in-depth answers, if that's okay. We will move on. Thank you for that report, and we'll move on to the first reading of the operational plan. That's memo 22. Dr. Gandhi.
Thank you. Every year at this time, administration presents our annual operational plan, and we do it in a process of having multiple readings, just so the board members have an opportunity to review it, provide feedback if there's anything that you would like administration to consider, and then we would bring it back for board approval. Really, our focus for this year is going to be to address learning loss and focus on teaching and learning overall as a district. We know that we are in a really fortunate situation where the benefit of the ESSER funds that be given to our district, we're able to go beyond the original intent. The original intent was for schools to resume in-person instruction, and since we were able to do that effectively as of last January, we're now able to use those dollars to focus on learning loss. So you'll see a lot of those activities in our operational plan that are outlined this year. Some of the other things that you will see that might be newer to this year is the continuation of some of the equity work that Tamara is bringing into her department as well. And then, if you remember, 2 years ago, we worked on developing at our State of the Schools and Public Focus Group a 5-year MTSS plan, so just strengthening and executing what we're doing around both MTSS-A and MTSS-B is outlined in this plan as well, continuing to provide wraparound services for our students. So what you have in front of you is our operational plan. It is all of the items, the action items in our operational plan are aligned to our strategic plan. And then the operational plan in itself is divided into 3 categories that are based off of our Cognia standards, which are leadership capacity, learning capacity, and resource capacity. So whether it's now or even between now and the next board meeting, if you have any feedback, let us know. If not, they'll be brought back for your approval.
So there's lots of reading here for us to do. I'm sure we've done our homework ahead of time. Just a few questions. Is there anything, if we take a few minutes for about 3 questions on this, and then if there's necessary follow-up, we could do that? Anyone have any questions? Okay, well then we will move on. Next item is the academic performance, student achievement data, results indicators. Dr. Gross and Missy Eidsness.
Well, thank you very much. Each year we share with you as a board and with our community some of the data points that are part of our strategic plan, and that all aligns to strategic initiative number 1, student achievement and growth. And in that strategic plan, it says that as a result of the Fargo Public Schools efforts, our students will meet or exceed individual learning goals towards the achievement of district standards or benchmarks for academic proficiency in all content area. And then in particular, we drill down a little bit further and we get to one of the goals is around assessments. And I won't read the entire screen for you, but really what we're talking about is let's use these assessment results to determine what best practices and procedures either need to be continued, modified, or put aside so that students can be as successful as possible. Tonight, we plan to share with you data around the measures of academic progress, or MAP, around the North Dakota State Assessment, around ACT, and around advanced placement. And as we go through that, we will divide this presentation up between myself, Missy Eidsness, and our new Director of Standards-Based Education, Dr. Leanne Hansen. So we'll go through that together. So the first piece that we want to share with you is around the measures of academic progress, or MAP. And the results that we will share with you are for the winter of 2021. And in there, the strategic indicator says the percentage of students meeting their individual growth target on the district's interim assessment, or which is MAP, will increase annually. as we talk about COVID-19 and the impact it has on students, and we hear a lot around learning loss, one thing that we wanted to share with you is some data that comes directly from the organization that creates the MAP assessment. And even back in 2020, they began their study around what did COVID-19, or how did it impact learning, and what will that long-term effect be until we can get back to total normalcy. So this report talks about that a typical student would have roughly 70% of the learning gains they would in a typical year in the areas of reading, and, which is alarming, in the area of mathematics would typically have 50% of the learning gains that they would in a typical school year. I think this is something that we have seen in the Fargo Public Schools. I think this is something the state of North Dakota has seen and our nation has seen. But we just wanted to share that piece of research with you. So as we go through the information, we have that. This study goes on to talk about or share a graphic that I think is very telling. Each one of those colored lines is a typical grade level, 3rd through 8th grade. And that line would go from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, typical last day, that dotted line on the right-hand side. And then there's always a typical summer slide as education stops, students have other activities and so on. And what this research showed is that when we got to the point of school closure and changes and so on, 2 different things happened. You had a slowdown of increased knowledge and skills and ability, or you had a particular slide. And you can see both of those dotted lines are shown there on that graph, which I think our data will also show as we look at that slide that COVID had it on our district and across the nation. This is for reading. And then if you look at the chart for mathematics, you can see how even more dramatic that is, that slide due to COVID. So that was just to maybe set the foundation for some of the data that we have, and then I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Leanne Hansen to continue our conversation.
Thanks, Dr. Gross. So for the first goal, we looked at growth in our MAP, reading and math. And so that mean normative growth is the average growth that we would expect to see with students. And the blue line is all of our students. So through the winter of 2021, we were above that mean normative growth. And we do expect, we want kids to grow, and we really talk about, in schools, we talk about making sure kids grow at least a year. And we're seeing some of that. And so, but then when we talk about growth, we also have to talk about proficiency as well. And so what we were able to do is, although this doesn't answer the question from the plan, I wanted to pull out some specific data that did show proficiency, because as you saw the growth line, we had all of our student groups that are listed to the right. They actually, above or below that line, were following the same growth. So we're seeing growth from our student groups, but the proficiency is lower in certain groups. And so in certain groups, a year's worth of growth may not be enough, or instructionally, we may need to provide some additional resources, some additional instruction. So I pulled 3 of them that I really wanted to focus on in proficiency. So again, this is reading. And again, they were still showing growth. So as a district, as an average growth, we're above that mean average growth. But we want to also then focus on that proficiency and making sure we can close that gap. Because if we just continue to, growth is good, but we will never close that gap until we have some of these student populations achieve more in proficiency. So that
Leanne?
next, so then.
Leanne?
Oh, yep, sorry.
Can you speak into the
I'm
microphone?
sorry.
There you go.
If I had a mic, I'd be good. I'm sorry. So then what we did is we put, here's what made growth. So we had 2019 to 2020. And so green means that specific grade level made growth. And then we had the difference. So although in 2021, we had the majority made growth, it wasn't as much growth in 2019 to 2020. And it goes back to what Dr. Gross had spoke about earlier with some of our, I think, difficulties with COVID, with instruction, and that COVID slide. So, but we still made, with the 2021, we still made, I think it's 2 out of 7 grade bands. We still made that in terms of our indicators for this piece. So same sets of data, but this is for math. So similar, you see some similarities between 2016 and 2020, but then you do see with math that drastic drop. So by 2021, we are below that mean normative growth. Our average student is not making enough growth throughout the year. And so then we also then pulled the proficiency of, and I did the same 3 student groups. And those same 3 student groups are lower. I mean, I would say our all is also low for proficiency. And I think that, you know, Dr. Gandhi spoke to Tier 1 instruction. And as an instructional institution, I think this really showcases our need to look at our guaranteed and viable curriculum, the instruction that is happening for all. Because we have specific things we need to do with our student groups, but we have, I think, some work to do with all groups around our instruction that we're providing kids. And again, I think our growth shows that, but our proficiency kind of highlights that. So for math, it's a lot of red, but we really did go down for growth. And so we want to bring up the growth for all kids, and then we want to reduce the gap as we have those student groups and the gap that we have. And I think we can do that. I know we can do that by really focusing on our Tier 1 instruction and what that looks like for each student, and then how we really move forward with our interventions then in Tier 2 and 3 instruction. So we met this goal for 0 out of 7 grade bands for math. The next piece, we have our North Dakota State assessment results. And so for that goal, we actually looked at, the target is proficiency. So the percentage of students meeting North Dakota State standards for language arts, math, and science will increase annually. So instead of looking at growth, we're looking at proficiency for our indicators. So on this chart, we have both reading and math. The blue line is the blue columns are the state, and then the black line is the district. So we continued until COVID to be above the state average. We didn't have state data for 2021 yet. We had our district data in there, and you can see for both reading and math, it did drop as well. We can make assumptions about the state data, but we just don't have that yet. So then as we look at proficiency again, for the 18-19 school year, we had, thank you.
Sorry, I think it's hard for some of us to hear that
I'm
are in the
sorry.
room here, so I apologize. Thank you very much.
Yep. So what we looked at so what the first kind of column looks like for 18-19, so 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, those grade levels were still below the state average, but 6th, 7th, and 8th were above the state average, which, as you saw in the first graph, raised our average above the state. Now, we didn't color any of the 2021 because we didn't have state average to compare it to. But as you look, those averages of proficiency did go down. And so again, we want to continue to work on both growth but proficiencies. And MAP is correlated to our NDSA testing, and so it's an indicator. So as we look at MAP data throughout the school year, we can make some assumptions, and we have some information that we can use to work with kids and to instruct kids and to really make sure we're making growth. So this is reading, and then, and then math. So you see a little more green across the board. But again, there are some places, well, I would say they all went down for the 2021 school year. So we do want to look at where are those gaps and how can we continue to raise achievement and growth with all kids, but then with our student groups as well. So what we said, because we didn't have the 1920 data, that we can't determine the percentage or the meeting the results on this one for either math or reading.
So then as we continue, we're going to go through, if it's all right, the next two sets of data, and then we have the so what part, what we are planning to do this school year to directly impact what the data is showing us. The next two pieces of data talk about the ACT. And in our strategic plan, it says the percentage of students meeting the ACT benchmark scores for English, college algebra, social studies, and biology will increase annually. Just a reminder that the ACT assessment really is a predictive assessment, and what it's designed to do is say if a student scores at a certain cut score, they are 50% chance probable of getting a B in that similar course in college or university, or 75% probable of getting a C or higher in that course. So those cut scores for those different grade bands of English through biology are listed on the screen for you. You'll notice that the cut score is not the same for each assessment. It is unique for each one of them. So as we look at our data, although this data screen does not directly connect back to what's in the strategic plan, yearly we do share with you how we are doing, we, meaning the Fargo Public School students, compared to the rest of the students across the state of North Dakota. So on this chart, the blue would be the state of North Dakota results in those subtests. The orange would be Fargo Public Schools. So if we are just looking at a comparison between the state and Fargo, it appears that we are doing well there. But if we get to the actual piece that's in our strategic plan, it says that each and every year, the percentage of students meeting those cut scores will increase. The data looks like this. And you'll see, just like our MAP data, just like our North Dakota State assessment, we do see a slight decline in the students' cut score, that average cut score in English, math, reading, science, and composite. So as we would look at this indicator of success, we would say we have not met that during last school year. The last set of data that we want to share with you tonight is advanced placement tests. And what the strategic plan says is that the percentage of students earning AP exams with a score of 3 or higher will increase annually. Why 3 or higher? Well, according to the College Board, each institution of higher ed can come up with their own rubric on how they would transcribe an AP score, but on average, it looks like what's on the screen here. So if a student scores 3 or higher, they basically are transcribed as C, C+, or B- on that college or university transcript. Again, each university can come up with their own rubric, but this is typical across the nation. So that's why we look at that 3 or higher. So this is just the trend history from 2015 to 2021 of the percentage of students in each of our comprehensive high schools and a district who received that 3 or higher who took the exams. And we did not increase from 2020 to 2021, but one thing I would like to highlight is almost 70% of the students who took an AP level course scored 3 or higher. That is a very good percentage. Not that we want to stay there, we always want to increase, but still it's a good indicator of how our students did on those AP level exams and courses. But with that, because we went down from the previous year, we would have to say that indicator was not met.
I guess I'd like to talk about process and next steps. So the process that we have is that each year the teaching and learning department comes up with a district improvement plan. And then we work alongside the buildings to make sure that their plans align, yet their plans have room to customize for their building needs. Each action item in the plan will be documented for teaching and learning in the operational plan as you review that before your second reading. The action items, how do we decide on those? It is more than just academic data. So we use attendance, academic data, behavioral data, which is discipline and social emotional data, and then collaboration with whether it's PLCs, building leadership teams, principals, director meetings. In addition, this year, we did survey students, staff, and family around reducing learning loss. And then that leads into the ESSER grant funds. And so we're blending the district improvement plan with the federal ESSER grant that allows us some additional supports to reduce learning loss due to the pandemic. So then some of the pieces that we're doing, I just wanted to highlight is one piece that overall staff, students, and the administration felt strongly about was providing additional certified teachers in all buildings. And so we have some additional teachers to provide benefits. There's two folds to that. One is to gain capacity with teachers in skills that we value, and the second one is to provide direct intervention to students. The other piece is mentors and tutors to provide additional support at different levels, and again in math and in literacy. Special education and English learning each have plans, and the plans have multiple pieces to them, and it ranges from providing tutoring to extra instructional time and instructional resources. Supports to reduce chronic absenteeism through our data search became something we had to take a look at and make a stronger plan for. All buildings have to have action items around what we call pre-chronic absenteeism. What are we gonna do before a student reaches chronic? Because we know that if they're not there, we cannot teach them. And so how do we work with families in a wraparound approach? And in that approach, that's why we need our SWIFTs, our social workers, and we've added targeted case management through PATH. That partnership is also allowed because we have a grant with United Way that allows for families that need that service, which is 24 or 12 months a year, which is really nice to support that learning loss that happens in summer and over breaks as we go forward. Classroom engagement, anytime we can improve our classroom engagement, we gain what we call on-task time around our topics. And so that involves training of teachers, restorative practices, mental health supports, and behavioral health as we go forward. We also added optional assessment days at the elementary, hoping that that would help teachers get to know their students so we can start small groups sooner in the fall. And we did have just kind of a shout out to the Fargo parents. Not all, but many took advantage of the opportunity to come in to have the assessments. And so we think we need to review it and make sure we tweak it for next year, but we thought it was a very positive assessment days. Additional resources for literacy and math. One piece we did notice with the literacy or math instruction is we've had a downward trend over the last few years in our math instruction, especially at the elementary. So we are doing a curriculum review of math this fall, which could lead to a different resource being adopted. But one piece we felt we could grab onto right away is numeracy. And so in all classrooms, we've adopted something called Number Corner, which is a structured way of teaching numeracy in the elementary, which will become part of the day in all elementary students. And so, and then at the middle school level for math, we have hired math coaches to go in and to really help us with our instructional pieces. So we felt the math data really led us to look at some best practice strategies or promising practices for mathematics. And that is the conclusion, and we certainly take any questions.
Robin had a question. Dr. Gandhi, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I think I just want to follow up with a couple of things. First off, I just want to acknowledge our teaching and learning team and every educator that we have in our district, because we could have approached tonight's conversation in a wide variety of ways. We are very well familiar with the fact that we didn't hit a lot of the indicators that we designed in our strategic plan. Some of those indicators were ambitious, and we know that. Some of those indicators are not going to be realistic to increase year after year and everything, but we're also not shying away from this conversation. And I think it's important to know that the 4 people in this room and all the educators that they represent in this district, they had a wide variety of choices when we asked them to put this on the board agenda for tonight. They can contextualize the data, come back and say, let's wait till we have the state data that shows, even though we showed some drops, it might be more than the state. We can compare to the national averages, but it doesn't matter at the end of the day. I think it's important to know that we're committed to that work, and that's where our focus is going to be. It's also important that one piece of information that they didn't share is that 2 of the data sets, context with data is everything. And 2 of the data sets are going to be data sets that I will probably suggest that we remove from our strategic plan down the road. Getting a 3 or higher on the AP exams and the ACT tests. Because we as a district, when we look at parity and disparity of our students and our subpopulations and with our focus on equity, we want to open up access. Those are two practices and assessments across the nation where many school districts will only select certain students to take AP classes, and that might not be reflective of their demographic. Well, if you're going to hand select certain students that are going to qualify, and the College Board actually gives you a report of which students have a potential to get a 3 or higher, well, then your average is going to be higher for the more amount of students getting that. I think we want to focus more on, does the access to AP classes reflect our student population? And there's a 2008 and 2012 College Board study that says regardless of whether a student gets a 3 or not, just taking an AP class increases the opportunity a student finishes a 4-year institution. So those are things that we're taking a look at as well. Same thing with ACT. ACT is an opportunity we offer all of our students in the state. When you compare nationally, it is not something that all students take. Then you also have first-time takers versus some students that have the opportunity to take it multiple times. So when you're comparing averages, it's also important to contextualize that data as well. So just wanted to provide some of that context. I think they might be a little bit too modest to share, but at the same point, we do know that we have some work cut out in front of us because of COVID, but we're also not afraid of that work. And one of the things that we've talked about at Cabinet that we want our data analysis team to take a look at is just over the progression of a K-12 career within Fargo Public Schools, what has our data historically shown us? Because there might be times where we have seen students that don't make 1 year's worth of growth, but then they catch up by the time they get to another grade. So where are areas of strength and where are there areas of opportunities for growth that we need to take a look at? And then also take a look at the mobility. We have about a 33% mobility rate within our district. So does our data differ for students that have come to our district within the past 3 years versus students that have been with us for 3 years? Because then we know that data could be a product of the education they received the year before or even the year after. So those are things that we are looking at as well. But just want to say kudos to our teaching and learning team for really being focused on where do we move forward and how do we engage in this conversation going next.
Thank you. Robin?
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Our educators have our student success top of mind. When you see the slide, you attack the issue head-on, as does every educator in this district, I firmly believe. So thank you for your efforts. The expected loss in math and literacy is common nationally. This is not isolated to our district, and I thank you for not backing down and accepting the average, because that's why we are what we do in Fargo Public Schools. I'm reminded of your conversations about your term, growth to target. We are always striving for growth to target to get our kids to meet those standards, and I have seen that year after year after year in this district. I also am reminded that we are meeting students where they're at. Every student has different abilities, different backgrounds, different baggage they bring to school. Thank you, because that's what we do for our kids. We meet them where they're at, and that has been consistent for decades. So I'm very proud of our district. When I talk about the summer slide or the, I call it brain loss, it is very common for that to happen. I'm going to shout out to some of our partners like United Way, Boys and Girls Clubs, and YMCA, because they have quality programming that helps those children learn when they are in summer programming. So that is quality programming, but there are some students that can't afford that. Their parents aren't aware, particularly the lower income, the LEP, those that are on IEPs, and families that have worked multiple jobs. So that is part of what we do in educating students. So are we in a tough spot? You bet, but so is everybody else. So I thank you for your efforts to bring our students success, because that's what any educator I know is committed to do, and that's what makes Fargo Public Schools great.
Who else had a question or a comment? Jennifer? David?
Thank you. So I too have recognized over the last few years, and I sincerely appreciate that this is a conversation oftentimes difficult to have, but that it really forces us to have the conversation around targeted approaches and what's working and what isn't. And that's how we move the needle. So having said that, in the last few years during this presentation and also up on the slides, one of the things that I noticed, right, was from 2016, very prior, several years prior to COVID slide, that there were concerns, and we have discussed that from time to time within this presentation. But I am curious, what sort of targeted approaches, maybe did you find things that worked or not? Will you be just enhancing those for COVID, or does it look completely different? If you could maybe talk a little bit about those learnings.
All right.
That would be helpful.
Dr. Gandhi has his hand up,
Okay.
so let's let him take a crack at it.
I'll start, and I know that they may have more, but I'll start with some of the things that at least we've been talking about and that have come to mind with us. First and foremost, when it comes to education and taking a look at student achievement, we always look at a 3-year trend. So it's also important to know that sometimes the standards for an assessment could change, that we would no longer look at the 3-year trend because they could raise the bar. A prime example of that would be the assessment that we give to our ELL students, the WEED assessment in 2017. There were 2 significant changes in 2017 and 2018 with the WEED assessment. One was we started offering, and when I say we, I mean nationwide, in K-12 schools, started offering a paper-based option, and there was a dip in performance from there. And then they re-standardized the assessment proficiency standards, and we saw significant score drops. So I think it's important to know that we always have to look at a 3-year trend to determine a root cause and then target what's working or what's not. I think from the conversations that's been shared with me, the 2 of the biggest focuses for us as a district is that we have seen an increase or stable amount of students that are chronically absent, as defined by being absent at least 10% of each semester. And that we do know that when you look at Hattie's research and you look at a lot of other research, chronic absenteeism has a direct impact on student achievement. So that is going to be a focus for us as a district. So this year with ESSER funds, we started some of this work last year. We were hiring student attendance specialists, taking a look at our processes, and also making chronic absenteeism as part of the school improvement plan goals for our students. Missy and Dr. Hanson will probably expand on this a lot better than I am, but I think we've noticed in the last couple of years is that our elementary math curriculum is something that needs to be revisited, which is why Missy mentioned that that might be something that we have to go through. Primarily what we saw during COVID was that whether it was a short time, whether it was the variance of instructional models, our elementary students were not looping up to the vertical alignment to get geometry standards, and we were seeing just a lack of performance there. So that curriculum impacts pacing, or they both impact each other. So you have to kind of take a look at that too and how that's aligned to the standards that are being assessed. But those are 2 things that stand out for sure.
Dr. Gross and Missy, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think the other one would be, as we look at our social emotional learning curriculum, COVID has been very difficult on families, on our students, and we have seen an increase of need for mental health supports. And so some of the things that we've expanded, we can't tell you like how it's gone, probably for each family, but we can tell you that people are using the resources that we have provided for them. So whether that is virtual mental health counseling appointments, or last year, were able to bring back in person at the end, and we will do again. But we do have some desire from families and students for that to continue. I think we just had an article in the Fargo Forum by one of our students about needing mental health supports as we go forward. And I think we are learning we just met with our mental health providers and talked about solutions. And we'll keep investigating how we can do that to provide those supports. But I will say that one thing that we're really diving into is trauma-based informed care for students. And so we are seeing that UCARU, which has been in the district now for 2 years, it'll be our 3rd, is going district-wide, in that the training has really helped solidify all the prior trainings we've had, and making sure that we provide comfort and care to students when they're struggling. And I think that mindset has shifted from saying, oh, I think someone, they just need to behave, that we're gonna dig down on why, how do we fix that? And it's just become, I guess, more complicated, but we know we're getting better results by working through those pieces.
The only thing I would like to add to the wonderful list that has been shared is much of the data that we are talking about tonight is summative data. And it's data that's done at the end of the year or the end of a learning period. And it's good information for us to look to see how are we doing as a system. But I think another area of focus that we have in our district is how do we look at data on a daily basis to drive instruction in our classroom. And the big focus that we have in our system around formative assessment. And it's our staff who are willing to come together to talk about what are those essential learning things, essential learning outcomes that are tied to the standard, that we create that just-in-time assessment. We come back together during a professional learning community time. We talk about how the kids are doing in our classroom, and then we change instruction based upon that. I think that's another large step that we are taking as a system, and it is the hard work of our staff and our teaching staff that are doing that. So a long list of things that we are doing to move the needle on some of the things that we're sharing with you. Not all of them have to be based only on those summative pieces.
David?
I think it's interesting that you say that we change our strategies to meet the needs. One of the speakers tonight spoke directly of second language, of people whose first language is not English and how important it is for them to have facial recognition. That's not a lie, it's a truth. I've been speaking English my entire life, and it's the only language I know. And I find it very difficult in some instances to understand people if I'm not looking at them as they're speaking. I can't understand when we know that and we see the data showing that our numbers are dropping, and it's very disturbing to me that we haven't come up with some means of allowing those kids, if it's just those kids, facial recognition. We say that we'll do anything to help these kids achieve, and yet we're taking away one of the things that they probably need the most, and it's one of the simplest things we could do. This double talk is just driving me nuts.
Dr. Gandhi?
David, I respect your comments. I think it's a hard conversation to bring instruction for ESL students into the mass debate. I am a former ESL student, so English was not my first language, it was not my home language, and I went to school learning ESL. I think it's also important to know that I understand the controversy around masks as a mitigation strategy, and I think that is a board decision, and that's a conversation of its own. I think that we really need to be cautious in not making sure that we don't generalize education for ESL students just to facial recognition either. We had several ESL students throughout our district last year that were part of in-person instruction or hybrid instruction, and they did have opportunities to learn, and masking was not controversial last year, and it's something that we did. So I think sometimes there is merit to what you're saying, and there is value to that, but you have to contextualize a value with value of one aspect of an educational gain versus other risks or other educational gains as well. And I think that sometimes it could be patronizing to our ESL students to diminish their entire educational process and say just because they're wearing a mask or there's a mitigation strategy in place, they're not learning. That's a far leap for a generalization that we can't make at this point. So I would just be careful with that.
The information, David, go ahead.
I never meant to say it in that regard. I was saying we don't take away any of their tools.
Thank you, David. The information that is shared and the work that is being done is greatly appreciated, I think, by all of us. And I too was thinking about the comment from one of the constituents here this evening, sharing many concerns about some of the subpopulations and the need to address those groups, all students, specifically subpopulations. And I know that's something that we have discussed for quite some time within the district. And I'm very happy to see that it's moving beyond discussion. It's moving to data that will provide us with a plan, help us provide a plan that we are going to be able to measure for success moving forward. Let's move on to the FEA report. Kim is here.
Good evening, School Board, Dr. Gandhi. My name is Kim Belgard, and I am returning from virtual world to the classroom. I'm very excited. So I'll be teaching 5th grade again at Bennett Elementary, half-time. I'm our FEA president once again, serving my 3rd term. And I have the great pleasure to inform the board that the FEA has overwhelmingly ratified the negotiated agreement with concessions made by both sides. And I brought the signature page, so you guys can sign that hopefully tonight. And then I just wanted to speak to Memo 28 on today's agenda and tell you that that would be a violation of our negotiated agreement that we're hopefully signing tonight. Lori and Doug were told not to put an amount on that contract. And until we were finished negotiating and it was not changed, this would put teachers against teachers. The amount is incorrect, and the district cannot in good faith pass this memo. It would be breaking contract. So please take a look at that.
Thank you, Kim. And Kim called me prior to the meeting mentioning the concern. Thank you for this. And we will take that up as we get into business and see where we would like to take it. Happy that we have the ability to conduct the business for the contract today. And Kim and I have had some very good conversations lately, in person and on the phone, and have a commitment to continue those conversations. Obviously, there is a requirement within the contract and the MOUs that we are going to be working through for us to have that dialogue. I think that also beyond the requirement for us to have that dialogue, I believe that Kim and I choose to have the dialogue. Looking forward to it. All right, Superintendent report, Dr. Gandhi.
Thank you. I will, and thank you to Kim for your comments too on Memo 28. I will speak to kind of where administration's memo came from. It came from Doug and myself when we introduced that. So I just want to make sure that we will touch on that and when we get to that business item. Just 2 major updates. I think first and foremost, tomorrow's the first day of school. We are excited to welcome all of our students back. Our staff have been back and doing their in-service. I think, I don't want to be presumptuous here, but I think many of our staff kind of appreciate the 3 days that we had prior versus 2, and that might be something for the calendar committee to consider down the road, but we are excited to welcome students back. Like I said before, across the nation, there's about 6% of the school districts in the nation that have more than 10,000 students. So when you actually think about K-12 public education, it's a small group of students actually, or small amount of districts that fall into our size of a district. Last year, not many of that 6% got to finish the school year in person. It's great that we all will, and many school districts are coming back to that. It's also great that it's not going to be a learning experience for us because we've been doing this since January of last year. So we are excited. Our goal is to keep and sustain in-person instruction and then focus on the whole child and Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 instruction across the board. So really looking forward to that for those of you that are available. Friday night is the first football game for Davies against Shanley on the new turf field. At halftime, they will be doing a ribbon cutting ceremony there as well. So if you're available, please go by and look at that football game too. It should be a good time. So lots of good things happening in our district. The second item that I just wanted to share with the board is, as you may know, during legislative session, there was about $10 million worth of state grants that are also dependent on some federal funds that were awarded for the purposes of career workforce academies. The Cass County project is called the Career Innovation Center. The collaborative that involves Fargo, West Fargo, Central Cass, Northern Cass, and NDSES is going to be applying for that grant. The other 3 school districts, they have had board approval on the grant itself. Jackie and I have made the decision not to bring that to the board approval for this time. We are still going to have our name on the grant, but the situation is that we have not figured out who the fiscal agent is going to be. Because our understanding from the board in previous conversations is that we don't want ownership of that brick and mortar part of that building, and we don't know what the U.S. Department of Treasury is going to set out for their federal regulations. And there's some obligations a school district, if they're the physical agent of a grant, per federal school construction guidelines that would have. And we just don't want to make the board committed to something that you didn't know that you were committing to. So we are fully supporting the project. We're fully supporting the grant. That collaborative is still in the process of determining who is going to be the entity that the money can kind of flow through or take ownership of that piece. So if at any point that grant requires approval from the board, we would bring it to you, but we normally don't bring grants, all grants to you, or we also don't bring any grants of a partnering organization, which is what that situation is here. So if you hear something about, see our name and part of this grant for the Career Innovation Center, we are fully supported, but that's the reason why we haven't asked for a board resolution on that, because we don't want to commit something inadvertently on behalf of the board. So that's it for the superintendent update.
Anyone have questions regarding the update? Jennifer?
Thank you. May I just clarify one thing? That is not the 100,000, right, in grant, or I'm sorry, 10 million in grant amount is not, it's collectively distributed
Throughout the state, yeah.
By how many partners
Well,
that would be on the grant?
so the state has allocated that amount of money for anyone regionally interested for a career innovation center, and I don't know how much the state's going to allocate. I think Williston's working on a career innovations or career workforce academy, and there might be a couple of other projects. So that's not yet determined.
And so here, for Fargo, you would be asking or collectively asking for how much of that grant?
I think the group would be collectively asking for as much as possible. So the Career Innovation Center that broke ground with the intention of a phase one of that project. But the goal is really, there's a two-phase project. So depending on how much we get in that grant is how much we can build out that Career Workforce Academy.
Gotcha. Thank you.
All right, are we okay to continue with the rest of the meeting? Is there a motion for approval of the consent agenda with the HR addendum? Robin,
I move approval of the consent agenda with the HR addendum.
is there a second? Second. All right, there's a motion and a second for approval of the consent agenda with the HR addendum. All in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Business, item A is ratification of the 2021-23 contract, memo number 27. The contract is at our desks if we need to refer to it. David, are you interested in introducing this? The memo does come from you as Chair of Negotiations.
I think it'd be pretty fair to say that we started negotiations this year with a Grand Canyon between the two of us. I have never seen the FEA and the school board work as hard in negotiations as they did this year. I think tremendous amount of credit has to go to both the FEA and the school board's negotiations team. I think we did a very good job. And I was extremely pleased that we were able to, the FEA was able to ratify a contract, because I honestly thought at the beginning of negotiations that there was about as much chance of a snowball existing in hell as there would be for us to not enter impasse. As a result of negotiations, there were two very important memorandums of understanding that occurred. One involves recess, and the other is going to be a very in-depth examination of compensation packages. The FEA and our board president will be selecting members of the committees that will be examining each of those. They both have deadlines, and I'm looking forward to what comes of that. But as I said, I'm very proud of my team. I think we worked harder this year than I've ever seen a team work that I've been a part of. And I would like to make a motion that we approve the 2023 teacher contract between the Fargo Board of Education and the Fargo Education Association and issue contracts accordingly.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second for approval of the contract in front of us. Any questions, any discussion? I would like to echo, I am extremely proud of both groups. I was not at every joint session, but I was at many. And it took a while to get to where we are. Happy that we are at a spot where we are going to be signing together. I don't see any hands or indication of questions. Anne Marie, please call the roll.
Holden,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Robin Nelson,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Benson,
Yes.
Gullickson,
Yes.
Knutson.
Yes, motion passes. I will be sharing a document here that is available for those on the committee to sign a little bit later here. Moving on to item B, the new teacher placement compensation item, memo 28. Dr. Gandhi, would you like to share some thoughts here? This comes from you and Doug Andring. Doug is not able to be here this evening. I believe he's at back to school night?
That is
Right?
correct.
Okay.
So I'll go ahead and introduce it. I just want to introduce first by saying thank you to Kim and the FEA for her comments and just for their acknowledgement. And what I'm about to share is not meant to, this is not, has at all to do with our relationship with FEA, because we really do respect FEA, and we are extremely grateful to have a ratified 2-year contract in our district. What I'm about to share is just simply a presentation of facts, and this is where administration is just asking the board in terms of how do you want us to move forward. As you know, the board negotiations ended earlier this month. You just ratified the contract about 2 minutes ago. And in the past, we haven't had necessarily negotiations end that early or even in the school year as well. So we do tons of hiring throughout the summer. And when you hire an individual for a teaching position, they want to know and they expect to know what their salary is going to be. It has been our practice to always land back on the previous negotiated agreement and let that individual know that, hey, if the contract were to change, or there might be an increase. Because traditionally, in the past, when we hire someone in the summer, if negotiations are still going, for the most part, when the negotiations are settled, that person has a higher amount than what we quoted them the previous year. So throughout this year, obviously, we've hired teachers to fill positions. We've also hired more teachers because of the ESSER funds and for some of the projects that we're doing. Throughout the summer, especially early in the summer, as David referenced, it was a Grand Canyon. We had no idea where contracts were going to be, where negotiations were going to go. And HR had salary offers. We had principals that had to fill positions, and teachers said, what's my salary going to be? I need to know that to accept an offer. So HR's practice has been reverting back to the prior negotiated contract and giving that rate. What was negotiated ultimately was that for some of these teachers, it's a lower salary now, based on what their year would have been. So this memo coming from Doug and I is, do we honor the commitment that we made at the time of the hire? Because negotiations were still going at that point. We didn't know what the salary was going to be. And if a teacher was promised, based on the prior negotiated agreement, that they would enter our district at a certain salary structure, but that steps and lanes have now changed where it's a lower amount, do we say that you're not going to get the amount that we told you at the time of the hire? So that's what this memo is addressing. It's about 80 individuals. The total would be about $65,000. That's for the board to kind of decide and discuss.
Jim?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the contract amount based on the 2020-2021 teacher salary schedule that have been issued to the newly hired teachers.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Is there discussion? Again, the item in question, I believe on the memo, at least that was highlighted to me, is regarding the statement there about 80 contracts at a total of approximately $65,000 in total pay differences between the 2020, 21, and 21, 22 salary schedules. Dr. Gandhi.
And I do want to acknowledge that while negotiations were ongoing, we did receive, FEA did reach out and ask HR, don't give an amount to the teachers that you're hiring. Unfortunately, that's a hard thing to do because people want to know what they're getting paid for. So I want to acknowledge FEA because I don't think this is their fault. This is just a product of the circumstances.
David.
I'm trying to count in my head the number of teaching offers I've had over my career, and I think it would be somewhere around 7. In every single instance, when I asked what the salary would be, they said, well, last year's salary was this. If they were in the process of negotiations, they said the salary may change. I don't think that Ms. Bellegarde was steering you wrong. If we approve this, we will be in violation of the contract, absolutely without a doubt. And I am definitely, absolutely against this. We negotiated in good faith. The fact that offers were made without knowledge of the end of negotiations is, no, it shouldn't have happened. We negotiate a contract. That's a contract the teacher should be working under.
Robin, and then Seth.
I will be voting against this as well. I think that our salary schedule is based upon years of experience and education credits. So I think it's the right thing, simply the right thing to do to bring those teachers up to the current salary schedule.
Seth.
I won't be voting for this either. I just want to, be able to remedy this situation at some point in time, hopefully sooner than later. When we're negotiating, I think we need to be looking forward instead of looking backward when it comes to the salaries. And so while we're in limbo, I don't think we should be giving exact numbers out. You know, we should be saying, this is where you would be if you were to get hired, but at the same time, by the time you get hired, we're hoping that this contract will go through. It could be X, it could be Y. We just want to let you know that. And if they're still wanting to do the job, then we hire them and they get that salary. It's hard to backpedal in some of these instances, and I think we can get away from that in the future.
Dr. Gandhi, and then Jennifer.
I don't disagree, and this is not something, I mean, administration has brought this to the board for your discussion because the board's negotiation committee is the one that ratified this contract. It is difficult because we do have some individuals where it could be a small or large amount that dictates whether they leave their current place of employment or not. For the most part, these are individuals are coming in with experience, because what happened here is that if we had said on the prior negotiated agreement, step 2, lane 2 was X amount, and then this year, that's a lower amount, and they had accepted that. So normally that hasn't happened in negotiations. The last negotiation cycle didn't end till the following January, and we have some individuals that the number was contingent upon whether they took the offer or not, and I get that. Moving forward, we'll be more than happy to have this conversation to remedy it too, but that was a situation that we were in, trying to fill positions, and most of these were filled early in the summer before negotiations or the salaries were even being discussed at the negotiations table. And we honestly had zero idea that the salary structure would go backwards in some positions, and we understand why it did, and there's no problem with that. It's just that some people were made an offer, but we'll be happy either way.
What needs, if this does not pass, what needs to happen next? Dr. Gandhi?
Well, if this doesn't happen, HR will have to, I think, I'd have to get with Doug and Lori on that, but they'd have to redo the contracts for the individuals at the time of the offer and go back to the current salary structure.
Jennifer?
So my question has to do with the legal position that this puts you in. I completely appreciate that it is a violation of the renegotiated contract, and I do think clearly it should have been part of that conversation, recognizing that this was an offer made prior and knowing that that wasn't going to align with what was negotiated should have been at the table, in my opinion, and remedied then. As I listen to this circumstance, I think about if they and the district have signed an agreement or even a verbal agreement. And as you mentioned, perhaps they had another offer that they would have entertained more heavily had they known that the pay is going to be different. So I say all that, and I think, I don't know, perhaps you ran this by legal before it was brought here, but if not, I would propose that we table this and have that discussion with council.
Robin?
I agree. Some are going to go down, some are going to go up. But whatever we do, it needs to be consistent. From my HR background, whatever it is, it has to be the same all the way across the table. So what would happen if we did table this for 2 weeks?
I don't think anything. I mean, we'd address this whenever we bring it back.
So we could retroactively adjust the pay like we have in the past, or help me chronologically here?
Yep.
Okay.
And may I ask one more question? Would that give us an opportunity to have this conversation? You know, I mean, I know negotiations, I feel like we should have maybe had this first, but it's neither here nor there now because I want to honor the contract that we just did too. So I feel like the district's really in a position here where.
It sounds like we are in the position where if we wait a couple of weeks, we can act and still make a decision, and that will be fine and appropriate. Robin, and then David.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in the future, I'm sure you'll look at summer contracts a little bit differently with their inclusions, which live and learn. That's how we live life. So,
David.
Wasn't the amount of time that teachers have to return their contracts reduced from 30 days to 15 days?
Yes.
14.
So will we have time before another meeting? Or will we have all of the contracts back by that time? I don't know that we have 15 days to think about, or we have until the next meeting to think about this.
Would we need to call a special meeting, perhaps?
we could.
Yeah, certainly could. So there's a discussion about tabling. Anne-Marie, what's the process here, please? Remind me.
If you wish to postpone this conversation until the next meeting, you would need someone to make a motion to move to postpone the motion to the September 14th meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second to postpone this discussion to our next regular board meeting. Any discussion on the motion? No discussion? Anne Marie, please call the roll.
Johnson,
Yes.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Robin Nelson,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Paulson,
No.
Benson,
Yes.
Gullickson,
Yes.
Holden,
No.
Knutson,
Yes. I believe motion passes.
8-2.
Okay. All right, on to 7, board reports, committee liaison and correspondence reports. All right, Jim, go ahead.
I don't have anything to report, but I just want to give a shout out, thank you to all of the board members for a great job getting door prizes and a great job helping at the picnic, especially to Brian and Tracy for giving up some of your skin to those barbecue grills. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
All right, let's go to Robin, then Brian, and then Nikki.
Thank you. GAC will be, thank you for all of those that have offered to serve on this very exciting committee, the Legislative Committee. We'll meet in September to establish an annual work plan. More soon, we'll reach out probably with a doodle poll for meeting. North Dakota School Boards Association, I was asked to sit on the Legislative Committee for State Resolutions, which we will review at our fall conference. I've also been asked to moderate a panel at the state conference regarding North Dakota PERS, which is the entire public employees retirement systems. There's a study committee, so I'll moderate that. And then also, thought you'd be interested, I serve on the Chamber Public Policy Committee. During the last meeting, we talked about committee structure, but Workforce Academy was a huge priority for them, and that passed, so they are watching that closely. We will also be considering the legislative priorities again, and they have valued adequate funding for education and how it affects our community, as well as quality childcare and its effect on business. That is all I have.
Thank you, Robin. Brian?
Just a board picnic, thank you, that was great, Anne Marie, lining up all your part, thank you.
Nikki?
Yes, thank you, Anne Marie, for all you did, and it was a pleasure to see so many staff and to be able to engage one-to-one and face-to-face and spend that time. This was my first one, and I was looking forward to it and thoroughly enjoyed it, so thank you. CEA, Communications, Engagement, and Advocacy, met last week. We made a decision to continue on our prior plan and continue to enhance that, and we had some real good discussion about some upcoming communication opportunities. So, thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. Dr. Newman?
Thank you. I've had a few BU advisory board meetings since the last time we reported out. I too enjoyed the staff picnic. I tried my hand at grilling, which was an adventure. I had my individual board meeting with Dr. Gandhi today. Thank you for that. And then just to say that I am excited for the first day of school tomorrow. I have 3 children that will be attending all different levels. So I have an elementary and a middle and a high schooler tomorrow that I'll be dropping off all 3 of them, much to the high schoolers', chagrin. But anyway, I look forward to that, so.
Seth?
I have nothing tonight, thank you.
Jennifer?
Thank you. I attended my very first Community Development Committee meeting, which I enjoyed very much. I learned a lot, and pretty sure I have 4 pages of notes at home sitting on my desk. But I see, it was a lot of learning for me being the first meeting there and how all of the connections, but I was so pleasant. They presented around HUD, and I learned a lot about sort of the liaison positions that they do have and the partnerships that they do have, and also saw some opportunities for the future too. So a lot of great work being done. But thank you for that appointment, and I look forward to sharing more in the future.
You're welcome. David?
No report, thank you.
Robin?
I forgot, you reminded me, I also attended my, second term of Fargo County Public Health Board. Most of the discussion was around recommendations to the city and the county about mitigation strategies. So thank you for the reminder. Forgot about my new appointment. Thank you for the appointment. It's a great group.
You're welcome. My appointment, again, is Native American Commission, and I will report on that at our next meeting because we will be meeting next month. And yes, the picnic was wonderful to be able to hold. I want members of the community to know that it's a picnic that is sponsored by the Board of Education for staff. And we are celebrating and honoring the staff of Fargo Public Schools. It is, certainly we have enjoyment in being at that picnic. It's not a picnic for us, even though it's called the board picnic. Yes. Let's see here. There was one other item that I was certain I wanted to mention. I guess it was about back to school. Yeah, I can't believe that the summer has gone by, and wishing everyone, staff and students, a great year. I have 2 seniors. I will not be dropping them off at school tomorrow. I don't think that would go over well at all. Any rate, I'm sure the year will whiz by. Wishing everyone health and happiness throughout the school year. And our next meeting is September 14th, and at 7:15, we are adjourned.